Roger Kerr of the Business Roundtable will be listening with enormous satisfaction to this debate tonight, because for 20 years he has been, and the Business Roundtable have been lobbying to privatise our water supplies, and this bill is the prize, the culmination of 20 years of intensive lobbying. In fact, in this bill, Mr Kerr and the Business Roundtable have achieved their wildest dreams, as not only will this bill, once it's passed in about an hour, allow foreign-owned multinational corporations to own our water assets for 35 years. They will be able to get their hands on these assets, these strategic or any other strategic asset, without having to consult with local people, because this bill takes away the requirement to consult when councils sell strategic assets. But best of all, in a little clause that was sneaked in after the submissions had been heard, after local government had made their submissions, there is a little provision which says councils can sell any water infrastructure if they believe that the sale is desirable, for the success of the joint arrangement. Now, members of the National and ACT parties have been trying desperately to deny that this bill will allow water privatisation. But this clause, this little clause that was sneaked in at the last minute, actually says unequivocally that any council will be able to sell any water service if they believe that the sale is desirable for the success of the joint arrangement. That is water privatisation by any other name. And one can only speculate on the intense lobbying that must have gone on in secret by the powerful vested interests, the major water companies, Roger Kerr and his Business Roundtable, to get this bill passed. And I think it would be very much in the public interest if the public were to have an answer to the question, did the Business Roundtable and the global water corporations, have they made large financial contributions to the ACT and National parties? So perhaps one of the next speakers from the National Party could answer that question. Now, there's been a big debate recently in New Zealand with our opposition to foreign ownership of land. But what will New Zealanders think when they realise that once this bill is passed in an hour or so, our water supplies that have been built up over generations by ratepayers can now be sold to any multinational corporation, to any of these huge private multinational corporations who, I might say, are literally scouring the world looking for water supplies to take over, because they have worked out that as water is becoming increasingly scarce, they want to take advantage of water shortages, which of course is a natural monopoly, by buying up water supplies around the planet. Now, once a water corporation takes over a water supply, as they'll now be able to do in New Zealand, their goal is not to protect the public interest or to ensure that everyone has access to safe and clean water. No, their goal is very explicit. It is to maximise the profits for their shareholders, and they do this in three ways. It's almost a formula. They do it all around the world. The first thing they do is they sack most of the staff that run the water services. Then they charge more for water, so the price of water soars and becomes unaffordable for many people, who then have their water cut off because they can't pay their water bills. And the third thing they do is run the water infrastructure down. They don't bother to fix the leaks or invest in the infrastructure, and instead they siphon off the profits to shareholders. So in England, just as a bit of a case study, but I could give examples all around the world, in England the water industry, immediately it took over, it was privatised. They fired 25% of the workforce. They increased the price of water by 50% in the first 4 years. They slashed their investment programs. They used the savings to increase the dividend and pay huge salaries to management and to the directors of the water companies. While customers faced continual price hikes and the number of people having their water supply cut off tripled, company profits soared by 142% in the first 8 years. And this is what will happen in New Zealand if any local community has their local water supply taken over by a private water company. I was about to say if they allow it to happen, but of course it won't be up to the local community anymore, because under this legislation a local council will be able to flog off a water supply without having to consult with the locals, so locals need not even know about it. Now, one of the problems that once these corporations have this, they own or manage a water supply for 35 years, or if they even sell it under the provisions I was just reading out, locals and their representatives will have virtually no say over water supplies for the next generation. And the contracts that the local council will enter into, they will be secret, they'll be commercial in confidence. So ratepayers will be completely in the dark about what are the provisions, what's the deal that has been struck between the council and their water company. Many contracts have guaranteed rates of return for the water company regardless of their performance. Chile, for example, had to guarantee a profit margin of 33% to sewers as a condition. Another thing is that once these contracts have been signed, you're locked into them. It's very difficult to get out of them, even if over 35 years circumstances change radically, or if a company happens to go bankrupt. What happens then? And so it's hardly surprising to learn that water privatisation has a terrible track record around the world. And there is a huge and growing backlash against water privatisation. Literally all around the world, communities are fighting back against the water privatisation of the 90s. It happened in many parts of the world, particularly Latin America, aided and abetted by the World Bank. So more and more councils and governments are trying to get out of contracts they entered into with private corporations. In France, that used to be known as the home of water privatisation, more than 40 towns and cities have taken their water services back into public hands. In the past decade, Paris took back its water services amidst huge controversy just earlier this year, and other countries in Latin America are doing the same. So the other problem, of course, though, if it happens here, I mean, it is ironic, in fact, that just as around the world, the water companies are being thrown out. They're being thrown out by grassroots opposition because communities have woken up to what happens, and they understand that, why would we allow water, a precious resource, one of the life support systems of the planet, to be handed over to private corporations to decide whether they will turn off the tap, whether if somebody can't afford it, they will turn off the tap, and of course it is not in their interest to worry about water quality or so forth. So around the world, they're being booted out, these private water companies, even across the Tasman. Just in Adelaide, they've decided not to renew the 15-year contract that Veolia had to run their water services. So now, all the Veolia and other private corporations, multinational corporations, they can pack up their bags and come across here to New Zealand because they have achieved their wildest objectives with this bill. They now can not only contract out water, they can do whatever they like, contract out water for 35 years. They don't need to alert the public, they don't need to consult with the public, and in this sinister little clause which the National Party and the members have failed to mention, they are now able to sell any council can sell to any private water company their local water supplies if they consider that desirable for the success of a joint arrangement. So we have opened our doors to water privatisation. We have gutted consultation, not just for the sale of water, but for the sale of any strategic asset. This bill is the implementation